Hello, my name is Matthew, and I've been reading Les Miserables by Victor Hugo. I've been reading this Penguin Deluxe edition, translated by Christine Donahuer, and I've only just started it. I've read about 100 pages, but I wanted to talk about the beginning of Les Miserables, or reading it for the first time, because this is one of those books that can feel very intimidating because of the length and also the reputation. This is a book known to be expansive and grand and epic and full of Victor Hugo's famous digressions. The sewer system chapters come to mind. But the first 100 pages of this book, I've read a few times, and it's one of my favorite beginnings of a novel. And I want to talk about why I love it so much. I should say that for somebody that might be interested in reading Les Mis, the intimidation, the feeling of intimidation, can be valid, especially if you've never read Victor Hugo, haven't read anything by Victor Hugo. It's the same sort of thought process that I would have for somebody that might be interested in Dostoevsky or Tolstoy. They have these great big epic works, but they also have things that are much more approachable. So you could read The Death of Ivan Ilyich or the Krutzner Sonata or one of the many, many great short stories by Tolstoy. And the same thing for Dostoevsky with his short stories or Notes from Underground, or I would always recommend The Crocodile. But it's not, it doesn't seem like the right thing to do to just recommend, go straight to the biggest, most epic work in somebody's canon. And I actually went through that experience with Victor Hugo. I had read The Hunchback of Notre Dame and loved it. This is years ago. Then I read Toilers of the Sea, which is one of my absolute favorite novels, period. I've read The Man Who Laughs. I think that might be the three novels that I'd read by Victor Hugo to that point. And I kept putting this one off because it was so long. And one day I kind of screwed up my courage and thought, well, I'm reading every day anyway. This is an author that I love. And the fact that it's long just means that there's going to be more stuff to enjoy. And I think that's a really good way of approaching really any longer work, especially if you already have some bearing on an author's general style or literary sensibilities. So, the beginning of Les Miserables, and many, many people, most people that haven't read the book still know the story because of just the cultural zeitgeist. It's one of those stories that everybody knows, and of course, the Broadway play, the Broadway production, and a recent movie, and it's Jean Valjean, and he steals a loaf of bread. He goes to prison for, I think it's like 17 years. He gets out of prison, and then his life goes on, and things happen. It's also tied up. You might have heard with the French Revolution, and so it's this great big book dealing with large, important topics and a groundwork for Victor Hugo to a groundwork for Victor Hugo to have these digressions and pauses, moments to pause and reflect and unwind his philosophical attitudes, or to show his incredible knowledge of current events and history. The first 100 pages of Les Mis are nothing like that. It's not this great, big, grand, epic, sweeping narrative. Instead, we get one of the most fabulous portraits of a man. And it's this bishop. The bishop's name is Muriel Bienvenu. And he goes into this little French town. He's going to be the new bishop of this town. And there's a great big palace or a mansion or something. And then next to it is the parish's hospital, which is small and closed quarters. And throughout the 100 pages, we essentially get like a modernized version of historical parables, the kind of parables that we read in the New Testament with all of the different encounters that Christ has and his reactions to them. And we get this with this this bishop who is a truly good man. He believes in God, he believes in the soul and the afterlife, doesn't have material incentives or material motivations. He wants to be, he wants to live the life that he is preaching. And we get these great examples. The first great example is that he's now in this, he's in his new palace, and there's the small hospital, which is overcrowded and overrun and unsanitary, not enough beds for the sick. And the bishop is talking to maybe another one of the priests or a warden of the hospital, I don't remember. But he's looking at this huge palace that he has, which he lives with. It's his sister and then another woman. And it just occurs to him that they've got the housing situation reversed. And so he switches it. He takes the poor and the sick, brings all the hospital beds, all of the medical treatment, the nurses, and houses them in the grand palace so they have space. And the bishop and his the two women that he lives with, they go into the hospital and live a modest lifestyle. We get this great description of a real itemized budget of the bishop, and it shows how much money he's giving to the poor. And he has barely enough money left, just enough money to live and for him to feel like he's being happy and content. So one of the women in the house says that the church should offer traveling expenses, and the bishop says, "Well, that's a great idea. That would increase our budget." And so he goes to the church and he gets an extra 1,500 francs, whatever the value is, and the whole town is now in an uproar because they're suspicious. They go, "Aha! He came in here." Acting as if he's this holy man and giving away everything, and right at the first moment, here he is taking these traveling expenses. We live in this little town; there are no traveling expenses, and the bishop, as soon as he gets this extra money, immediately diverts it back to the poor. And we just get all of these examples of the bishop being in these situations and showing how much he loves people and trusts and respects the people around him. And he talks about their souls. There's a great moment where there's these bandits in the mountains that have stolen money from the church, and there's a little village up in these mountains, and the bishop says to the women that he lives with and other people that he has to go up and spend time with them. It's been far too long, and they say, "Well, there's these bandits out there. You're going to be in danger." And he goes, "No, I'm not going to be in danger. What are they going to do?" And he goes up in the mountains. There's an interaction with the bandits, but he's so kind and so authentic and humble that by the time that he comes back down, there's like a big chest full of all the stolen possessions that were taken by the bandits that was now given to him. There's another example where there's an atheist. There's like a revolutionary atheist who's dying. It's his dying day, and the bishop decides he has to go visit this person, and they have this really tense, sad conversation where the atheist is making all these assumptions that the bishop lives this high and mighty life and has a palace and has all of this money, doesn't interact with regular everyday people, let alone the sick or the poor. And the bishop is just listening to this dying man. And finally, the atheist says, "Well, what do you have to say for yourself?" And the bishop mutters something in Latin, and he says, "Vermis sum," which translates to "I'm a worm," which I just loved. And for the whole 100 pages, essentially, we're just getting example after example of situations and how this bishop reacts to them. One of the details that comes out is that in this town, the bishop doesn't lock the doors of the house. And we get a very detailed floor plan and layout of the house, which becomes an important element when Jean Valjean finally enters the scene. And the intersection of their plots, for one, was surprising to me, because Jean Valjean's entrance into the story is actually after he's gotten released from prison. It doesn't begin with him stealing the loaf of bread. And we find Jean Valjean wandering the French countryside. He's been released. He has these yellow papers, identification papers, which identifies him as a felon or a released convict, and somebody to be shunned and exiled, and still to be treated as if he's a guilty man. He gets into this little town, and again, it reads like a parable in the New Testament, because he's exhausted, he's starving, he's thirsty. All he wants is a night's rest and some food. And we get this descent of the courtesy that the town pays to him. So the first innkeeper, after he finds out, the first innkeeper says that there's a room, says that there's food, there's a rolling fire, there's a pot of stew. There's a smell of food in the air. When it comes known that he's this convict, the innkeeper asks him to leave, but asks him to leave politely. And Jean Valjean is surprised by this, upset by this, but still leaves politely. And he goes into another inn, and he's thrown out more rudely. He goes into a stable and gets chased off by an angry dog. He goes out into a field, and it's not a pleasant night to spend outside. He sneaks back into town. He's lying on a bench, a public park bench. Gets insulted and abused by children. And finally, a woman comes up to him and says, what are you doing? Oh, he also goes to a prison, and the prison says that it's not a hotel. Like, if he wants to sleep there, he needs to get arrested first. But finally, a woman comes to him, and he just says, like, I've been chased off by dogs. I'm lower than low. Nobody will accept me. I'm destitute and exiled. And he says, I've knocked on every door. And the woman responds, well, have you knocked on that door? And we're going to find out that it's the bishop's house. But the woman says, I bet you haven't knocked on that door. And so Jean Valjean goes over with a knock at the door. The front door practically just swings open. The women in the house knew that there was this menacing figure roaming the streets of the town. They want to run out and get the locksmith to come over straight away to bolt the doors to keep this man out. And they're arguing with the bishop, who always has a kindly smile, and they're saying, the door is not locked. It's the middle of the night. There's this menacing man, and anytime there's a knock at the door, all you ever say is, come in. And right at that moment, there's a knock at the door, and the bishop, knowing all of this, just says, come in. And it's Jean Valjean, the ex-convict, now more animal-like than even when we first met him. All of the courtesy, politeness has gone away. Now he's aggressive and abrasive and outwardly saying, I'm this convict, no one will take me. And the bishop, I can't remember the French, but it was essentially addresses him as sir, asks him to have a seat, tells the woman, let's start getting dinner going. Let's get a room made for him at the adjoining bedroom of the bishop. We'll have him sit next to the fire. We're going to get the best silverware that we have. We're going to put out the silver candlesticks. And Jean Valjean just believes that this is a little local priest who might be a little out of his mind. And they just sit and have this conversation. And Jean Valjean is just so taken aback by how openly and respectfully and courteously the bishop has been treating him. They put him in the adjoining bedroom. It's directly tied to the bishop's master bedroom. They put the silverware away. Everybody goes to sleep. All the doors are still unlocked. And Jean Valjean just doesn't know how to take this. He wakes up in the middle of the night, and he decides to steal the silverware and sneaks out in the dark of the night. The only person in this town that treated him with kindness. He robs him in the middle of the night. The next morning, the women are alarmed. The silver has gone missing. And the bishop says, it was never our silver. Our job is to give to the poor. He was poor. It was already his. Well, there's a knock at the door, and I think they're called gendarmes, but police officers arrive at the door. They have Jean Valjean by the scruff of his collar and bringing him in. We found the convict. He has your silverware. And the bishop says, "Ah, Jean Valjean, why, when I gave you the silverware, you forgot to take the candlesticks." And everybody's jaw just drops. And he packs up the candlesticks, dismisses the police officers, and Jean Valjean is just so thunderstruck by what just happened. And the bishop says, "I just bought your soul. Now you can lead a good life. Here is your moment to go lead a good life." And I just find it so affecting and effective. The way that we get all of these examples, creating this portrait, a study of the bishop, all the way leading up to when we have this intersection, our first major plot conflict of the novel. It's so satisfying and it pays off. I absolutely love the beginning. I love this bishop. And of course, it goes on from there because it's much longer. Jean Valjean immediately makes another regretful decision, but we see, as the novel goes along, we see how this brief but important moment of the bishop in Jean Valjean's life, how much it impacted him, how much of an influence, how much of an impact it had on him. So, and I'll say that I've really been enjoying this translation, a new translation for me, Christine Donahuer. But that's the beginning of Les Miserables, and I really confidently believe that anybody that reads the first 100 pages is going to love it. It's just extremely well executed, and there are digressions, but this is Victor Hugo being very focused, controlled. So, okay. Les Miserables by Victor Hugo, about the first 100 pages or so. Just wanted to give some of my thoughts if anyone might have had those feelings of intimidation, and to give just a little bit of encouragement. So, all right. Thank you. Thank you for watching. Please leave a comment if you would like. Thank you and take care. Bye.